Testing, can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to get started, and Stephen, in the interim, you can work and eventually get the, hopefully get the PowerPoint slides up there. And again, if you don't, whatever I'm talking about or presenting, when you eventually get the PowerPoint slides up, there are hard copies over there. Okay, so just in the interest of time, we're gonna start. You guys are working on it. Okay, I'm gonna open in prayer. Father, we just ask for your guidance and direction and wisdom as we study your word on finances, Lord, and I just pray that you'll just guide and direct every step of the way here. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so the most common area that I see that causes people to get into financial trouble is when they're not managing their monthly cash flow well. They're unintentionally spending either all their income or almost all their income, and they're accumulating debt. In a lot of cases, a lot of people have accumulated debt over the last 10, 15 years, and they just don't have a good handle on their monthly cash flow. So most people spend a little more than they're earning, they accumulate debt, and we need to do the opposite. You need to purposely live below your means, make sure you're spending less than you earn, and you have a surplus each month so you can pay down debt and save for future needs. I actually did a study back in the 1980s, an in-depth study. There's about 40 references in the Bible to planning, and generally speaking, those references admonish us to plan ahead. We're almost always, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. A lot of people make hasty decisions, especially on purchases. They see something, it's on sale, they think it's a great deal, so they go ahead and they buy it thinking, hey, I saved some money. But if you couldn't afford it, you shouldn't have bought it in the first place. Remember, the best deal is not a 50% off, it's 100% off. You don't buy it. In this session, I'm going to provide 3 examples of typical budgets that are quite common and some recommendations on what you can do in your situation if your situation may fall into one of these 3 examples. Oh, good, we're back on the screen. Further, as usual, the names have been selected at random. I'm going to give you an overview of the 3 initial budgets, 3 different types of budgets we typically see. The first one I call it's an initial budget. Bill and Barb, his name's chosen out of a hat, of course. This is where individuals they do their first budget and they don't factor in their non-monthly expenses and some of their smaller expenses. They just put down their bigger ones and they think they actually have a surplus, but they don't. They have a deficit. The typical budget, which is really common, is where individuals or couples have factored in the non-monthly expenses and they determine they actually have, they're spending more than they're earning and they have a deficit each month. And that's the most common scenario in our country today. Most people have a deficit, they're accumulating debt. And it's easy to do. Lines of credit, credit cards, all that kind of stuff. And especially, although real estate's dropped significantly in this city, I understand about 20% in the last 9 months. Before that, since I guess about 1995 and actually after the recession of 08-09, since 2010, it's gone up a lot. And a lot of people, the equity in their homes increased substantially, and many people are using the equity in their home to get personal lines of credit in order to finance a lifestyle they really cannot afford. And that's what allows people to accumulate debt. When someone's owned a house for 20, 25 years, they should be mortgage-free. They really should be. But most of the people in our country are not, and they just don't see paying off their mortgage as being a priority. But they can now see the importance of paying off their mortgage when their mortgage payment goes up 20, 30, 40, some as much as 50%, because the interest rates have gone up so much in the last 9 months. And then I'm going to give an example of a budget where significant downsizing is necessary. They've got themselves into so much debt that they have to sell their home and find something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to Excel now. So I have to sit down to demonstrate this. And I'm going to get your comments in a minute on some of these budgets. I'm just going to first demonstrate. This is a couple, Bill and Barb. They sat down, they did their initial thing on their budget. You'll see their income's about $5,000 a month after tax, or $4,000 a month after tax in there. They used to tithe, but they don't tithe anymore because as the debt went up, the giving goes down. It happens every time. They got 2 car loan payments. They got a bigger mortgage than what they should have, so the debt goes up, the giving goes down. They got a mortgage payment. They got different types of expenses. But if you look at their their schedule. They're first showing on this first draft of their budget, they're showing a surplus, and they think, hey, we're in great shape. Well, no, you're not. There's a number of things you've missed. The property taxes. Now, because a lot of people pay property taxes once a quarter, so that's a non-monthly expenses. It needs to be factored on Form 3 of the budgeting system, which I'm going to show in a minute. Other things like house maintenance, they got nothing in there. Well, you need to factor something in for that and be setting it aside in a savings account. The same with house insurance. That may come up once a year. Insurance on the car may come up once a year. You got to save for that. Same with maintenance. All kinds of things that you need to set aside money for on a monthly basis. Vacation. They have nothing set aside on a monthly basis to save for vacation. So what happens when they go on vacation? It goes on the credit cards, and they're in debt. So their first crack at a budget, they show a surplus, which is simply wrong. The second time, when they actually factor in their non-monthly expenses, they actually have a deficit. And you can see it here. It's about $383 a month. And then they factored in, things like the property taxes. We picked that up as an estimate. The maintenance on the house, the insurance on the car, and the maintenance there. And they also set aside some money for a vacation. And the bottom line is, once they factor in their non-monthly expenses, and I'll explain this in more detail in a minute, they actually have a deficit, and this explains why they've been accumulating debt rather than accumulating savings and paying down debt. And if this was their first run based upon, let's say, their figures in 2021, this number is likely a lot bigger today because of the increase in interest rates. Their mortgage has gone up by 30%. So, for this couple, that'd be another $300 a month. Food's costing more, almost everything's costing more. So let me go to the next one, and I'm going to get your input on this one. This is what we call a typical budget, okay? This is, and I'm going to show you all the forms of the Copeland budgeting system. By the way, this can be downloaded for free from our website, copelandfinancialministries.org. And there's a 30-minute video there that explains how to use it. So, first of all, here's a situation with this particular typical budget of an individual or a couple. They got $1,000 in their checking account. They have investments of $10,000. That could be in a tax-free savings account. They got a personal residence that's worth $500,000. Now, if yours is worth more or less, don't let that bother you. It's probably worth more because real estate, seems every time I update these things, the price of real estate's gone up, and now it's coming back down again. So they got some money in their retirement account for the husband and the wife, $20,000. Now here's where you tell a story. Most people don't want to face the reality of their financial situation, and so they basically they ignore it. He's got credit card debt. She's got credit card debt. They're not communicating. They don't know how much they are. Next time they go to get their remortgage, there's big surprises because the banker does his credit check, and he notices that one spouse has $7,000. I just had a recent case, $7,000 owed on a credit card. The other spouse didn't know about it. How do you think that affected their relationship? Phenomenal stress. You can't run up debt on a credit card without your spouse knowing. You should have a joint credit card and a joint bank account. You need to work together as a team if you're married. But you got to list out all your debts. Face reality. And if you're single, this still applies to you. List out all your debts. And so this couple, they listed them out. Finally, they hadn't listed it before. They got $15,000 in credit card debt. They got $30,000 in personal loans, personal line of credit of $50,000, and a mortgage of $250,000. Again, remember, let's keep in mind, they bought this house 20 years ago for, let's say, $200,000. It's worth $500,000 today. And guess what? Their mortgage and their line of credit and their indebtedness is greater than the value of the house. That's so common. We see that so often. But you can already see, I can tell just by getting them to list their debts, they've likely been spending more than they've been earning for at least 5 years, maybe 10 or 15. Why can I say that? Because they've accumulated these debts. They got debt on their home that's greater than what they paid for it. It should be paid for by now. They got a personal line of credit. Again, for such a long time, because real estate keeps going up and up and up, for such a long time with the bank, if you got the equity in your home, they'll lend you money against the equity in your home. Now, if that ends up causing stress between you and your spouse or gives you sleepless nights or health issues, they don't care. As long as they got the equity in the home, and if you don't pay, they can evict you from your home and do a power sale or or foreclosure. They can get their money out. They don't really care. So I can tell that this couple's been spending more than they're making for quite some time, and that's going to show up on form number 5. Now, just the first question I'm going to ask. They have some investments in a tax-free savings account, $10,000. What do you think they should do with that? Just leave it as is, or do you think there's anything they should do with that? Raise your hand when you got an answer, and Dan or Eli will bring pay off your debt. Which one? Much as you can. Anyone in particular? The expensive one. That's right. Pay off the credit card. A lot of people they think, well, no, my investments in my tax-free savings, it's been doing great, and it's tax-free and that kind of stuff. Now, it hasn't been doing very great this year. We all know that. The equity markets are down 20-25% on the year. Even the bond markets are down, which is pretty unusual because interest rates are going up. But pay down the credit card debt. So that's one of the first things they should do. So we're gonna give these people some advice. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna say, okay, let's get rid of this, and let's knock this credit card debt down to $5,000. So suddenly our service on the credit card has been decreased by 2/3, and that'll show up on form number 5 here. Because right now what they're doing, they're just making the minimum payments on the credit cards. Now we can reduce it to $100 because we paid off a chunk of it. Okay, so let's go to form number 2. The husband makes $4,000. This is after tax and withholdings. The wife works part-time. She makes $1,000. That's $5,000 a month. That's typical of what we see, people having after-tax income, and is what we see. Form number 3 is the non-monthly expense planning. This is really important. This is where most people miss stuff. Remember Bill and Barb, the example I gave a minute ago? They thought they had a surplus. I was speaking to a lady in a small town north of London just a few months ago, and she filled it out for the first time, and she was convinced, I got a surplus. I don't need your help, Tom. And I looked at it, and she hadn't factored in her non-monthly expenses, and she hadn't factored in a lot of stuff, small stuff, miscellaneous, that she was spending, but she wasn't tracking. She hadn't been tracking her expenses, and when she started tracking, she was really surprised. So on the non-monthly form, if your house maintenance, you look at last year, over the last 3 years' bills, and let's say it's averaging $1,800 a year, you should be setting aside $150 a month. So when a repair comes up on your house, you got some money to pay for it. And you'll see in a minute, you put that in a savings account. Property taxes is $3,600 a year. You may get billed quarterly on that, so you should be setting aside $300 a month. Now, if you're paying your property taxes monthly, you don't have to set it aside in a savings account. House insurance often comes up once a year, divided by 12, that's $50 a month. Auto repairs and maintenance. Now, a lot of people say to me, hey, Tom, we have no idea what it's going to cost to repair our car. We don't know. If you, just a rule of thumb, allow $100 a month, $1,200 a year for most cars. So this couple's got 2 cars, $2,400 a year. If you have an older car, you may have to allow more. If you have a newer car, you may not have to allow as much. And then people say, but we don't know what the repairs are going to be. I just got a repair last week for $700. But if you start setting aside $200 a month, at least you got some money. Even if you can't cover it all off, you can cover off probably most of it. But most people don't set aside anything for the unexpected expenditures, such as car repair and house repair. Auto insurance, it's $1,100 each per car. It's $2,200. They pay once a year. So again, divide by 12, they should be putting aside $183. Vacation, what do most people do with vacation? They don't save for it. They put it on their credit card. And they think, well, we got a great deal on this vacation. And then when you factor in the 18 to 28% interest on the credit card they're going to have to pay, it wasn't a great deal. And they probably couldn't afford it in the first place. They probably needed to do a staycation. Healthcare, now that, if they're necessities, expenses, they may just have to stay. Christmas gifts. A lot of people buy Christmas gifts November, December when they're expensive. If you buy them throughout the year, you can often save a lot of money. Form number 4. First of all, if you notice on form number 3, the total here is $1,258 a month that this couple needs to set aside in order to cover off their non-monthly expenses. That's not even the regular stuff. Most people don't do this. By far, the majority don't do this. So form number 4 is your savings account allocation. And if you look at the 1258, the numbers that we picked up here over here on form number 3, 150, 300, they automatically go over under the Excel formula onto form number 4. And by the way, the price is right for this. It's free. You just download it. It's Excel-based. You can actually modify it. There's no password. So you can adjust it if you want. So it's totally flexible. But you can see these amounts are here. So let's say they've spent some money and they put some money out on house maintenance. They put some on auto repairs. That's the reason for the negative. And here's what will happen often. They got $1,000 left in the month. And so they're thinking of buying something. So the wife says to the husband, I think we can afford to buy that. We got $1,000 a month. We got $1,000 in our savings account. Well, no, you can't afford to buy it because in terms of these non-monthly expenses, the full $1,000 has been accounted for. So you can't afford to buy it because that's already designated funds for those future expenses that are going to come up. If you don't do that, then when your property tax bill comes up or your house insurance, the auto repair, you're going to, again, be forced to put it on your credit card or your line of credit. Form number 5 is a key form. It gives the overview. This couple's given $200 a month. They used to give $500, but they can't anymore because they ran up the debt and they got all these debts they got to pay. Their mortgage payment's $1,100. Property taxes is $300. That came from form number 3. It's anything calculated on form 3 with the non-monthly expenses automatically comes across to form 5. The hydro bill is $250 a month. The gas is $200, etc. Again, maintenance on the house, remember that was $1,800 for the year divided by 12. It was $150 on form number 3. It's come across here. So that's the total for their house. Their food bill is $700. Gas and oil is running them about $400 a month. Now notice they're not saving for their auto replacement, which they need to get there, but you'll see why in a minute they're not saving because they got a big monthly deficit. And so now the credit cards, I've already adjusted this, but before I made that adjustment, we were at $300. So you look at this couple originally had a deficit of $800 per month. That's $10,000 per year. That's really common. Really common. And it's not until people actually track their expenses on form number 6, where you just, this is a simple form, you just put down in a different category what you spend each day. You can keep track of it by using a debit card or issuing checks or whatever. Certainly if you're going to do some money with cash, you can do the smaller amounts. I do see lots of people, even myself, I take a certain amount out of the bank every week in miscellaneous for cash, which I use on groceries and miscellaneous stuff. One of the nice things about budgeting with cash, when you run out of money in your wallet or your purse, you know you can't spend anymore. With a credit card, you can run up big amounts, and as soon as you get to your limit, what do? They raise it even further. Want to get you further into debt. Listen, if you and I could make 18 to 28% on our retirement funds, we'd be able to retire real early. That's why banks will take so much risk in terms of giving out credit cards so freely. So let's go back to form number 5. Form number 5, we're going down here. They got gas and oil. They got insurance. Again, this insurance, remember, that was $2,100 a year. That came from form number 3. Maintenance, again, this maintenance, remember the car maintenance, $2,400, $1,200. These numbers here not only go over automatically onto form 4 as a designated amount in your right there in terms of your what's money's in your savings account, but it also goes to form 5. Form 5 is sort of the big picture overview of your typical estimated monthly budget. They're just paying their personal line of credit only interest. Again, a dangerous thing. If you can only pay the minimum payment on a credit card or the minimum payment on a personal line of credit, that's a red flag that you need to change some things. So eating out, they spend $275 a month. They were surprised with that. They hadn't tracked it before. They didn't think it was very much on the original budget. I remember often when you sit down with couples, it's maybe $50 a month. It's a lot more than they think. Vacations, $175. That was $2,100 divided by 12, and that came from Form 3. Clothing is $250 a month they're spending, etc. Insurance. And here's the key. They're spending $5,800 a month. They got $5,000 a month of income. This is a red number. This needs to be a good-sized positive number so you can start paying down debt and saving for future needs. Most people, this is a red number. The stats have been proving, even prior to interest rates going up and prior to inflation, the stats are showing, and I just see with experience, most people are spending a little more than they're making for years and years and years, and you can get away with it. Your house keeps going up. You just increase your line of credit. It's easy to do. So you're their financial advisor. What would you recommend? Let's give some advice. We've already come up with one where they're going to take the TFSA and pay down the credit cards, and so that would lower this one from 300 down to 100 a month as a minimum payment. That's not a long-term answer, but we got to try to somehow get a positive here. What would you recommend they do in terms of getting their finances in order? Raise your hand and give us your comments. What would you recommend they do? You're their financial advisor. Okay, we got one over here.
Definitely look at eating out. The variables, sorry, you can't do anything with, you can't do anything with your fixed expenses, but you could certainly check out the variables like eating out, vacations, and like you said, do a staycation and bring those expenses down.
Yeah, Mike checked out. In the meantime, we'll use Eli. So I did catch part of that. I may not have caught all of it because of the technical problems. But vacation, Lorene had mentioned. Why not do staycations? That number 2,100 could easily go to 500 a year. You do the staycations. In terms of eating out, how much can we reduce that to? What do you think? Zero. Okay. I'm going to be a little more generous. I'm going to put in $50 a month. Okay. Assume husband, wife, 2 kids. They get to go out once. What about the sports gym? What do you think about that? Yeah. You know, you can work out at home. Get a pair of track shoes. You probably got some. Walking is great for you. Get an exercise ball. Go ahead.
I don't think they should spend $250 on clothing every month.
Okay. I agree.
They can buy fairly used if they have to, or reduce it to maybe once every 3 months.
Okay, so what would you reduce it to? $75?
Well, zero may not be the answer, but maybe 50 a month.
How much a month?
50.
Okay, let's go with 50. Sounds good. Okay, what else would you folks recommend? Any other advice? There's one over here.
Maybe try to get a full-time job as the wife, or try to increase your hours at work as well.
Okay. So one option, and certainly reducing expenses. Another option is increasing income. And let's say let's say she's a stay-at-home mom or whatever. Let's suppose they can get some additional income. They could rent a room Airbnb, or she's a stay-at-home mom. She could take in some kids or get a part-time job or whatever. Let's say she gets $500 a month. I think that'd be conservative. Actually, that's maybe a little bit too low. Maybe let's say maybe $700 a month. So, okay, anything else?
Hi there. Wow, that was loud. I may have missed it, but tithing, is it in there?
Yeah, they're not tithing. They're giving $200 a month because they got too much debt. It comes to the end of the month. They only got so much money. They got a choice between making a mortgage payment that's probably bigger than what it should be. They got 2 car loans, which maybe they shouldn't have those, or should only have one. It's the usual case. The debt goes up. This couple, the debt's gone up over the last probably 10, 15 years. The giving's come down, always. In an ideal world, they should try to work back towards the tithe, but often you have to do that gradually. You can't do it overnight. Go ahead. There's one in the back there.
Okay. Excuse me, what restaurant are they doing this eating out?
So I missed that.
What restaurant are they doing this eating out at $50?
Anyhow. Okay, let's look at some of the other expenses. Let's go back to some of the non-monthly expenses, for example. Let's say house maintenance. Go ahead, make it quick. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking, is it possible they downsize? Like if they have
to downsize their home?
No, their home, like in terms of property.
That's a possibility, but I think you're going to see with this couple, if they earn a little more income and eliminate some discretionary expenses, they're not going to have to downsize.
What if they
The next case study, they do have to.
Okay. I was thinking of like garage sale, not like leave their home, but if they have stuff, that they are not using that they can sell off?
Let me talk about that in a minute, because we're going to have talk about ways to earn income. So just make it quick. Yeah.
I think you mentioned that they have 2 vehicles.
Yeah.
If they could get rid of one of them.
Excellent. Thanks. Thank you. That's a really good one. If they can get rid of 2 vehicles, that can save a lot of money. They can drop their auto insurance in half. Repairs and maintenance may not go down in half, but it'll go down significantly. And also, some of these other things, Christmas gifts, they could easily cut that down. Maybe just make arrangements and agreement on the maximum they're going to spend. So the bottom line is, we've worked away here, and what we've done here is eliminated some discretionary expenses. We've increased their income a little bit, and we're now in a situation. Now you could trim this a little further, but here's the key. Before it was an $800 deficit. Now it's a $900 surplus. Now they're getting ahead. Now they got some money to pay down debt and start saving for future needs. Having a positive cash flow is so important. Most people have a negative cash flow, or they're just living paycheck to paycheck, they're break even. And if you're living just breaking even each month, in due course you're going to be in the negative category when the unexpected expenditures come along, whether it be a house repair, a car repair, a dental bill, whatever. So that's this one here. Let me go to the next one, which I'm going to look at real quickly. It's a budget where they must downsize their home. In this case, the couple has a much bigger home. They got a much bigger. They got a bigger mortgage, and I'm just going to give you the high-level overview because there's lots I got to present. They got the same level of income. Their monthly expenses are actually higher because of the bigger house. And when you look at it, they now have a deficit of $2,100 a month deficit. And I've pushed the numbers on this many ways about eliminating discretionary expenses. They got no choice. They have to downsize their home. When it gets that big, they got to downsize their home. Maybe sell their house and move into a townhouse condo or maybe an apartment condo. So let me go back to my PowerPoint slides because I've got a fair bit more that I want to cover here, but I do appreciate your comments. Here's some real life case studies I want to give you, because through these case studies, these are all real life stories. The names have been selected at random. Through these case studies, I think you can use it to just help you get some ideas on what you can do to help your financial situation. Okay, Sheila and Betty are good friends. They are both single moms. They barely have enough money to pay for necessities. Their largest single expense is rent for their individual apartments. After attending one of our seminars, they learned they could both benefit significantly if they had shared accommodations, so they worked out a budget of what they could afford with respect to the rental accommodation and determined they could actually rent a small house together. It's now several years later, and it's worked out really well. The money they've saved on the rental costs enabled them to save up enough for a down payment so that together they could purchase the house they were renting. They both praised God because they knew that they could not have purchased a house on their own. So, question, what biblical principles have Sheila and Betty followed? Can you think of some scriptures they followed? Anything?
Maybe counting the cost and planning ahead from,
Yeah.
I think, Luke 14.
Yep, excellent. That's a good one, yep. They actually planned ahead, and they planned the cost. They figured we can rent a house together, and then eventually they bought it. Well, they did a budget. That's good. Good answers. Here's what I had. They planned ahead. Proverbs 21:5 is also another one you could use. The plans of the diligent lead to advantage as surely as haste leads to poverty. They obtained some biblical counsel. Proverbs 15:22 says, a wise man seeks many counselors, with too few counselors plans go astray. They did that by attending one of our seminars, getting the idea of shared accommodation. As you recall, I talked quite a bit about that last week, and I gave a 14-item checklist on things you should consider before entering into shared accommodation, but it can really help you financially if you get the right housemate. They followed up, James 1:22, they prayed and followed a budget, Eli made reference to, and they worked together as a team. Two are better than one because of a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Though one is overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of three strands is not quickly broken. Working together as a team can help people on finances. It can be two single women, two single men. It can be, I've seen it work with two couples, where, if the place is big enough and it can work. Stay-at-home mom. Bill and Leslie are married. Leslie's a stay-at-home mom looking after 3 kids. Unfortunately, they're currently running into some financial problems because their mortgage payment increased by 30%, and they've also got the increased cost of living. They're both very frugal as to how they spend money, so clearly they need more income to cover off these additional costs. So what are some ideas for Bill and Leslie to get their finances in order? What can they do to increase their income? There's one up here. Eli? It's on this side, yeah. What can they do? Some ideas to increase their income, then we're going to talk more about it generally. Raise your hand high.
I'm going to get raked through the coals again, but I'm going to say it. If you are a great cook, you can make meals and provide it to students for like a lower cost, and it would be home cooked and it would be nutritional, and you could make some extra bucks from that.
Yep, excellent idea. I know a lady I just counseled recently. She's a tremendous baker, and now she's baking. And now that the word spread out in her church there in Bradford, business is booming. She does a much better product at a less price than the bakeries. So, any other ideas for a single home mom? A mom staying at home with 3 kids. There's one way over there. Watch the time here.
What about a home daycare? She can take on a few other kids and make some money.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, and that's one of the ones I had. Child mining, I think they call it, like provide daycare. If she can take on 1 or 2 or 3 other kids, she can be on the receiving end of child care instead of the paying end. And as you folks know, paying for child care is very expensive today. It's a lot of money. So she can be on the receiving end. She's already looking after 3. What's another couple, right? No, I'm not trying to demean it, but now the ladies are probably going to lecture me afterwards. But still, it's just a practical thing. It's a way for her to see. On the other hand, if she goes and decides to get a full-time job, she's going to have to pay for 3 kids for child care. That's a lot of money. She's going to have to be a real high-income earner. Plus, her auto expenses going up, her clothing expenses going up. So it's just a way. This kind of additional income would help them. Now, we're going to talk more about increasing income. Case study 3, a couple who rents out their basement apartment. This is a real-life story, and I've seen it actually several times. Joe and Sarah are married. They're now empty nesters as both their kids have moved away from home. They followed biblical principles for the last 15 years, and they're totally debt-free, including no mortgage. When their son was a teenager, he lived in the basement fairly independently, which had a kitchen, bathroom, and all the essentials. They were thinking of downsizing their home, but after considerable prayer and asking the Lord for his wisdom and his direction, God answered that prayer and revealed to them what they should do. The next Sunday at church, their pastor announced there was a single mom in the congregation who was a very committed Christian who had 2 children who were being required to leave their current accommodation, and they needed an apartment somewhere ASAP at a very low price. The single mom and several people at the church had been praying that God would do something out of the ordinary to provide the single mom and their 2 kids with some decent accommodation at a really good price. God answered 2 prayers at once. God directed Joe and Sarah to rent the basement of their house at whatever the single mom could afford, which was way, way less than fair market value. But nevertheless, God moved in the hearts of Joe and Sarah, and they agreed to accept the modest rental payment. The single mom was blessed as she and her 2 kids had a decent place to live that they could not afford, and Joe and Sarah experienced the joy of giving, 2 Corinthians chapter 9. What's the first thing that impresses you about Joe and Sarah as Christians? The couple that own the place, willing to rent it out at much, much less than fair market value. What impresses you about them?
It appears that they were following biblical principles about finances, and they had probably paid off their mortgage and had no debt.
Yep.
So they were able to accommodate this single mom and her 2 kids.
Excellent point. Most people are up to their eyeballs in debt. They got a mortgage payment. They got car loans. They don't have an option. They're a servant to the lender. They don't have, even though they may have the heart and the desire, they don't have an option. They got to pay their mortgage, so they got to charge fair market value rent. Excellent point. Certainly, that's an excellent point. I'm going to go, and that's the first thing that I had. They got that flexibility. They've been doing it for a long time. Question 2. What do you think about Joe and Sarah renting the basement to the single mom and her kids at an incredibly low rate, significantly less than fair market value? Does God notice this kind of thing? Sure does. What do you think the long-term implications will be? I think of what Jesus said, do not build up treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but build up treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:19-21. This couple is building up treasures in heaven by helping a sister in the Lord in this way. And again, I bet you 90% of Christians, even if they wanted to do it, they couldn't do it. They got too much debt. It's commendable, it's biblical, and it's just a way to minister to this single mom. Also, Matthew 19:29, whoever has left houses, in this case they're giving up part of their house in a sense, or fields for my sake, will receive 100 times as much and inherit eternal life. Do you know when we invest in God's kingdom, the return on investment, is it 20, 30%, 40%? No. It's 100 times. Do you know what that translates into? Eli's an investment expert. It's 10,000%. 10,000% of rewards. For how long? For 10 years when we get to heaven? For 1,000 years? 1,000,000 years? 1,000,000,000 years? No, it's forever. It never stops. And Jesus said, for when the Son of Man returns in his Father's glory with his angels, he will reward each person according to what they've done. I'm actually in the process of writing a book now on the management of money impacts eternity. And people are going to be, that's the most, it's just unbelievable. How we manage money will impact the rewards or lack of rewards that we receive in eternity. 2 Corinthians 5:10 is very clear about the bema. Christians will be judged. What did you do with what I entrusted to you? It's like the parable of the talents. God's entrusted us with talents and time and money. What did you do with it? And there'll be rewards or lack of rewards when we get to heaven. My last one here is a couple in ministry needs support in another vehicle. Len and Lori are married. They are both work full-time in ministry with modest salaries and are dependent upon givings designated for their support. They've managed money God's way for many years, and as a result, the only debt they have is a mortgage on their home. When the mortgage came due, they were shocked that their mortgage payment increased by a whopping 35% because of the recent increase in interest rates. That combined with the cost of living increases due to inflation resulted in a negative monthly cash flow for them personally. And to complicate things further, their 18-year-old automobile was almost totally worn out and it needed to be replaced, but there's no way they could afford to buy one for cash or even take on a loan. They reviewed their budget again. They cut their expenses to the bone. They eliminated all expenses unless they were absolutely necessary. However, they still had a negative monthly cash flow that needed to be dealt with. So this couple looked at the reality of their situation with their mortgage payment going up so much. They prayed fearfully, and several friends at their church prayed fervently that God would meet their needs. Within a couple of months, a successful businessman at their church decided to support them for a significant monthly amount, and as a result, they could balance their budget. Praise God. However, they still had to replace their automobile. They prayed that God would do a miracle because the price of automobiles had increased substantially over the past few years, and they simply couldn't afford one or even take on a car loan payment. Several others in their church prayed as well. Not long after, an elderly lady in the church who could no longer drive because of health issues prayed about it, and God directed this elder lady to give Len and Lori the car, and it was in great shape with very low mileage. In other words, God answered both prayers, providing more income and providing an automobile as well, all at no cost. I've seen this kind of case situation many times, and I believe I've seen about 100 cars given away to Christians in the last 4 decades. And God can do these things. Think of Philippians 4:19, where Paul said, my God will meet all your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. Just like to make some final comments here. If you'd like to learn more about dealing with inflation, high interest rates from a biblical perspective, be sure to attend next week's session, where Pastor Don and I will continue teaching on this topic. If you cannot attend attention, be sure to watch it live stream or on the recording online, which can be accessed either from Copeland Financial Ministries or wesley.ca /Copeland. And that applies to everyone here and also applies for the people that are watching online. You're welcome to check that out as well. Free copy of my book. I understand they're all gone now. We'll bring some more. Each week I bring about 30 or 40 copies and they disappear pretty fast. So that's a good thing. CDs and DVDs, now I think there's some of those left there. I'm not sure. The hard copy of the handout, if you didn't get it, it is there. And for the people online, our virtual assistant, Darlene, will send you a copy of the PowerPoint slides so you can follow up on it. And she'll also send you my email address, because if you have questions, you can send me an email. I respond to about 30 a week. If there's questions afterwards, feel free to come up here. Ask me questions. Eli will be here, and so will Dan. They both have excellent knowledge of God's Word on finances. If it's about investments, ask Eli. He's the expert on that. And certainly if you're a newcomer, please come up and say hello. Love to meet you. Pastor Don's going to give his testimony and close in prayer.
I just wanted to give a quick word of testimony about the dangers and the rewards of ignoring or following God's guidance on finances. And I just want to share personally on how I failed and the cost I had to pay, and how becoming obedient to these principles completely changed everything. Sandy and I lived in Pickering. We lived on a street called Rambleberry. We lived there for 17 years. With what we bought the house for and what the money I was earning and the time that we were there, I should have been able to pay off that house entirely. I didn't. I thought I had a budget, but every once in a while, debt would accumulate on our credit cards, and I would refinance the house and pay off the credit card. So after 17 years, I unfortunately was one of the people that Tom was talking about. I owed more on the house than I originally paid for it. So when God called me to the ministry, I should have been mortgage-free. I was not. So Sandy and I were forced to downsize. We now live in Oshawa. I should have been able to buy that house for cash. I could not. I still had a mortgage. What caused all that? Because I'm not a crazy person. Like, I didn't buy Lamborghinis. I'm not an irresponsible person. It's because I wasn't paying attention to the periodic expenses. My budget took inflow and outflow and matched them, but it didn't save for auto repairs. It didn't save for vacations. It didn't save for the replacing the roof on my house, which needed to be done, or the windows, which were leaking. It didn't even take into account things that I paid quarterly, like municipal taxes, or yearly, like life insurance. So every month was okay, unless there was a periodic expense in it, in which case that would just go to debt, it would accumulate, and then I would refinance. So I would just encourage you to become obedient to these principles. I'm happy to report that we were in much better shape than we would have been without meeting Tom when we moved into our house that we're currently in Oshawa, and we have been very diligent in living below our means for the past 13 years, the time we've been in that house. And I'm happy to tell you that this coming January will be our last mortgage payment. So I guess what I'm trying to say in my testimony is, it doesn't matter who you are. If you break these principles will break you. High income earner, that's no protection. Low income earner, male, female, Christian, non-Christian. If you break the law will break you. That's the first part of my message. But the second part is, there's hope. You can turn this thing around. That's why you're here right now, so that you can be in a much better place in 10 years. I have never had access to less money than I do right now. And yet I've never had more money than I have right now. And it's because Sandy and I have learned to be content with less, to live below our means and to follow these principles. Tom, you're a blessing. Did you want to say anything? Are we done?
No, that's...
We are dismissed. We'll see you next week. Or I can give them this.
Yep. Oh, that's good.